Order. I call the honourable member Catherine Delahunty.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker.
Tēnā koe, Catherine.
Tēnā koutou te whare. Mr Speaker, the political parties often say that we all want the same thing for our children in this country, opportunity to fulfil their potential. And I do believe that that's true. But unfortunately, right here and right now, that's where the common ground has stopped. That great New Zealander Bruce Jesson, the late Bruce Jesson, once said, "Only their purpose is mad." And from that mad purpose flows a logical educational amendment bill which advances the privatisation agenda of the National Act government. This bill has so many obvious issues of concern to parents, teachers and communities that it's going to take some months to decipher. But there are also some interesting and obscure, disingenuous language which is raising concern in the community. I am going to devote some time to the core issue, which others have touched on eloquently, around charter schools and the failed model that the government's attempting to adopt. But there are many other issues in the bill, not the least the clauses on merging schools, where Christchurch is the front line of an incoherent experiment at the expense of already destabilised series of local school communities, and may well see these things being implemented against the wishes of the schools, students and parents. That will be paid for, I believe, at the ballot box. That's when, but it won't help the children who do not need any more destabilisation in their lives. And that also goes, Mr Speaker, for vulnerable children who struggle in education because of poverty, inequality or lack of cultural appropriateness in school. We are not avoiding issues here. We are saying we need to innovate in the state sector. We don't need to privatise. Now, there are clauses in this bill around boards of trustees, which the School Trustees Association has already raised issues on, and they've raised concerns about what I'm calling the do your best or else clauses around student achievement. As others have said, who goes on a board unless it is for the good of students? All of us who've been on boards or are on boards, we are there for the good of student achievement. We're not there to eat our not particularly generous lunch. So are these rhetorical clauses, or will there be consequences for so-called failure? I suspect that consequences of a failure are implicit in this description of the board's so-called new role. And there are also mysterious alternative constitutions and board models which minimise parental involvement, which are going to cause major concerns. Some other clauses include those around search and confiscation for students, and these sections may be useful if they clarify and limit some of the current practices, but at the same time they may also normalise unnecessary behaviour in schools towards the human rights of students. And so we are looking more deeply at that one to see if it's going to be necessary and helpful, or whether it's going to normalise a more pathological approach to student and school safety. Another fascinating clause in the bill is around early childhood, the leasing of public land for private development for the profitable side of early childhood sector. It's a disturbing development aimed at removing, again, there's a theme here, people, public assets and allowing the private profit sector to make money out of that land. There's another very disturbing aspect of this is called the national student number for people whose families where they believe the child's unlikely to get early childhood. It sounds like colour coding to me. Is it a tool for facilitating work and income to punish parents who are not enrolling their children in ECE? Or is it just a statistical, practical thing they need to do? That's something we'll be asking at the Select Committee. And then, of course, there is the beauty, the jewel in the crown, the charter schools. Now, I had the privilege of meeting Mike Feinberg from the KIP schools, who wears that shirt saying, work hard, be nice. But when I asked him about critical thinking, pedagogy that involved questioning why so many people in our country and his experience inequality, he wasn't interested in that. You do not question the status quo. You go into a no excuses environment, and I'm sorry, Mr Chair, you don't, and I hope no one else does, but we have to go into this environment as students and sign a contract. This is all about the contract. This is like the mafia. You sign a contract, you do the contract, or you're in trouble. And I had the privilege of hanging out with Karen Harper-Royal from New Orleans, where they've lost all but 6 of their state schools because of disaster capitalism, and now they're all in charter schools. And it's not working for those kids it's supposed to be working for. They end up being counselled out of these charter schools because they can't meet the contract. And the contract, as written in this current bill is exactly the same. It says that they must they must be in school for the hours in their timetable, which could be anything from 7 in the morning on a weekday to a Saturday afternoon. Who knows? But the point is, there is no scrutiny, there is no public involvement, there is limited parental involvement. And that's what I learned from Karen, who runs this group called Parents Across America. That Parents Across America are trying to deal with the failure of a model that we're trying to adopt. And it's very bizarre that we would do that, given that the Finns, who were also in New Zealand, represented by Dr. Pasi Sahlberg, focus on equity of achievement, equity of participation, and they get the results that we need. And so when I hosted Pasi Sahlberg here at Parliament with the National Party, and we had a conversation, it turned out that Finland actually has Indigenous people. It has the same issues that we struggle with. It has Sami and Roma people, and they fall through the cracks unless more resources are put into their Indigenous languages schools, which is what Finland's doing, and that's how they're improving. But no, we're not going to do that. No, we're going to privatise instead. So this charter school scheme, this Pepsi Cola High, as Chris Hipkins so rightly said, that Pepsi Cola High is on its way, not to mention the destiny homophobia classes. You know, it's all possible. This is going to be more expensive, more risky and lower quality. The government will deny it, but we've already seen in this country that every single little religious group, in particular some very fundamentalist groups who have strange ideas about what it is to be a human, and other groups who feel they need more cultural responsiveness will be flocking to set up their schools. And the fragmentation of society will follow. And we will be paying a price not only for individual students, but for the society. We support equity as a goal and the right of communities, especially tangata whenua, to develop kura based on tikanga and Pacifica. But this is not it. This is the contract. And when the contract fails, all it does is reinforce the vulnerability of people and families who are already vulnerable. One of the issues that comes up under the charter schools but may also be applied across the board, it's unclear, is timetabling. And this appears to apply to schools other than charter schools. And it raises the question about what's the problem. At the moment, we have flexible timetabling at some schools. Schools can set earlier and later start times. Or is this multiple timetabling really a way to double bunk school facilities? Again, is it for charter schools having the opportunity to force students into longer hours and weekends so they can learn and meet the standard so that they can fulfil the contract? That's how it works in the other charter schools. You can rote learn, you have to get them rote learning by keeping them in for more hours, and then they will perform to meet the technocratic, neoliberal, reductionist model of education, which has got nothing to do with real learning. Now, dropout rates from this kind of regime are notoriously high, and particularly in overseas charter schools, because this mechanism forces performance in a way that hinders success and reinforces failure. So we have many issues with this. While the government is determined to merge schools in Christchurch to save money, on the other hand, they're setting up charter schools that are going to suck children from the surrounding schools, putting pressure on the state schools. It's not only irrational, it's wrong. And the government can hire whoever they like to be a teacher. They appear to think that any person that can come into a classroom, plan a curriculum, engage the students, set learning goals, and create proper assessment options, they don't need any professional experience to do that. It's just something you can make up as you go along. And that will work for the most vulnerable. The heart of our system, which is why we are 7 in the world, is that only registered teachers with a practicing certificate should be able to teach children on a permanent basis. We're not denying the role of school support staff and volunteers. We're saying the leadership must be from people who understand pedagogy. And I dispute the idea that somebody who happens to be enthusiastic can walk off the street and actually deliver the kind of evaluation and pedagogy required. They can support, but they cannot lead, and they should not be there as a school leader. And that is why, despite the fact that we are, in international terms, underfunded, we do have good schools. They can be better, and the new charter schools have been given a blanket waiver from the reason that we have had the success that we had. And that is arguably legislative vandalism. But the worst thing is the secrecy. The worst thing is the secret contract with the sponsor, who again doesn't need any qualifications. There's no accountability for that person. Again, it can be anyone. It could be anyone involved in the business community who might like to make money. That's fine. So, Mr. Speaker, in summary, I fear that we're looking at a giant Ponzi scheme that's going to fail our kids. We have a positive view of public education, and we will be fighting this to the end.
I call the honourable member Colin King.